Hello, homies. Welcome back to episode 4 of the Gratis group chat. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that actually inspired the beginning of this podcast, and that is the death of the cool girl. This is an idea that I have had since August of 2021. I specifically remember sitting with my friend Lauren in uptown Minneapolis at French Meadow, and we were talking about how we wanted to start podcasts. And since then, we both have. She started her travel one this past summer when she was traveling throughout the world, and she still is. I think she's visited 32 countries in a year. So go listen to her podcast. It's called Low on the Go. And now, obviously, I've started the Gratis group chat. So it's exciting to think about where we were a year and a half ago and what we wanted to do. And now we're both doing it. But this subject really inspired the idea of a podcast. It was a pattern that I'd noticed and something that I wanted to speak on, but I didn't want to do just a post about it. It felt very out of touch with what I usually post. But I knew I wanted to address it because it was something I was seeing, something I wanted to pick the brains of other people about, and something I wanted to just talk about with my experience, because I think that there is something to being a zillennial, as I mentioned last week. Zillennials have this very interesting position in history where I can remember a time, not necessarily before the internet, because the internet kind of came around right after I was born, like a year or two after I was born in the late 90s. But I remember having no cable until I was like 7. I remember my grandma had a computer with dial-up. And if you don't know what dial-up is, your computer used to connect to, I believe, your phone line or your cable or something like that. And if somebody called your phone, your Wi-Fi would disconnect. And it made this awful sound when your computer would start up. And I have those memories. And I feel like I'm the last generation to be kind of pre-internet, really taking off and becoming social media and what it is today. And I have those really distinct memories of when certain apps and certain social media platforms came out and how they really have grown and changed. And so in one aspect, it's cool because you kind of feel like you're a part of modern history. And in another sense, it's really interesting to see how I grew up versus I have little cousins who are in their early teens or their tweens or they're still little. And the way that they are growing up is completely different from how we grew up when I was growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. Adding to that as well, I didn't know anybody who was famous. And I feel like we kind of have this new phenomenon, which I'll get into, about how regular everyday people now are becoming famous and gaining popularity and gaining notoriety and making a name for themselves. And back when I was even in my teen years, people weren't really doing that. People who were celebrities were out in Los Angeles or New York. They weren't in Minnesota or coming out of Ohio or coming out of Utah. That is a very new phenomenon that is just starting. And I think there's an excitement with that, but there's also kind of a fear with that because we don't know exactly how it plays out in the long run. But I remember having Facebook. I got Facebook when I was in ninth grade in 2009, and I had other friends who had MySpace and Facebook before me, but I didn't. And it was very new. And the way that you used Facebook was very different than how we use it now. You connected with your family and your friends and people you knew personally, and you did not follow people that you didn't know. Again, that really didn't come until Instagram, which I'll get into the history of social media as we go on with this episode. But I was just thinking about how Facebook was so simple and it was so personal, and it was just sharing with your family and your friends. And I really was thinking about the timeline when I started sharing a lot of my life on social media, and that didn't come till I was about 19. For reference, I'm 27 years old. So that is 8 years ago that I started sharing my life on social media. And I really want to start with that to help you understand this way of existing is incredibly infantile. It's very young and it's very new, and it does not have a lot of years on it. So it's going to be exciting to deep dive into that and to talk about that more. But I wanted to start by defining what a cool girl is, because there is something called a cool girl trope. And that is someone who is a female who kind of does guy things and she's cool and she hangs out with the guys and she's one of the guys. That's not really what I'm talking about today necessarily. She could fit under the umbrella of the cool girl that I'm talking about today. But in my mind, a cool girl is kind of the quintessential 90s, early 2000s popular girl. It's a girl who's distinct, she's rare, she physically is very beautiful and stunning, and she has a little bit of an elevated beauty above regular people. She also has a lifestyle that is just out of reach. And I think the elevated beauty and the lifestyle just out of reach are kind of the key points on this discussion of what make a cool girl different than people that we see today who are celebrities or popular who came from nothing. And we're going to get into that later. Now, maybe you're wondering, Kaylee, why are you just saying the cool girl? Why aren't you saying popular people? Why aren't you saying the cool guy? Why are you focusing solely on women in this example? And the reason for that is because the distinct switch that I'm seeing is not necessarily in the beauty standards for men. It's very much more so the beauty standards for women. Because I was thinking about men as celebrities and how they can, in my viewpoint, much more easily keep notoriety and keep their fame going longer because there aren't as many expectations set on them. So I think about people like George Clooney, or people like, I was even thinking about the Vlog Squad the other day and how Heath Hussar is getting hair transplants. So those transplants don't change his facial structure, they don't change his weight, they don't change anything else about him, but because he will have hair in certain parts of his head again, he'll continue to look youthful, versus we equate baldness to older people, and so, or thinning hair to older people. And so it's something to help him elongate his youthfulness. For men, it's maintaining a look as long as possible. And for women, it's completely changing everything about themselves in order to stay relevant. So let's start by laying the groundwork of this podcast thesis, so to say. I remember when I was younger, again, keep in mind, late 90s, early 2000s, what is very popular at this time? Two different things: romantic comedies and teen dramas. That is what is ruling the world of young women at this time. And so I started to think about what movies I loved and what TV shows I loved. And then I also started to take into consideration cool girls at my school when I was growing up, or girls that I just believed were prettier than me or more popular than me. And that's how I perceived them. And what made them stand out and what made them different. What made cool girls back in that time so spectacular is that they looked like a real person, and they naturally were just a little more gifted in the looks department than the normal human being. And there was always this joke at the time, if you look back at romantic comedies, when a girl is ugly versus when a girl is pretty, the only thing that changes is she flat irons her hair, she takes off her glasses, and she wears different clothes. But she herself doesn't really change. Her face doesn't change, her body doesn't change, it's all there already. They just changed a few little aspects about her, and we find it funny because people could see that she was pretty when she was a loser, and people could see that she's pretty when she's popular. But I think the point of that kind of romantic comedy joke was that the people in the movie couldn't see that. But I think that's what made it kind of fun, was we were in on the joke watching that movie and going, this person is very physically beautiful, even with braces and glasses or a retainer or their frizzy hair. Like, they are physically beautiful. And the thing that I believe kept popularity for them is women could look at that girl and they could say, well, if I just lost some weight, or if I just wore makeup, or if I just put a little bit of more effort into my looks, I could also look like that. And that was the epitome of a cool girl, is someone who has just a little bit of elevated beauty above a normal, average person that you would see on the street, enough that it made them stand out, but not too much that they didn't look like everybody else around them or that they could fit in with everybody else around them. So I thought about girls like Victoria Justice, Jamie Lynn Spears when she was on Zoe 101 at the time. She was very beautiful. Now, was she beautiful inside? I don't know. But physically, she was very beautiful and she was cool. And she lived in California at this school where there were no parents. I think that was maybe the coolest part about her. But the one that really got me was Degrassi. I was thinking about Degrassi recently and all the people who were on there and how those girls were actors, but they didn't look different from anyone I would see at a school. I could look at every single actor within Degrassi and say there's somebody at my school who kind of looks like that person. And I think that's what was so awesome about it, is there was a relatability there that was established from the beginning simply based on looks and lifestyle. Even things like American Girl magazines or clothing advertisements for big box stores, even the Victoria's Secret models in the early 2000s. If you look at them, they are physically very beautiful women, and obviously they worked very hard to be where they were, and they had incredible bodies, so I don't want to downplay any of that. But if you just look at them and their features, they could be classified as probably the prettiest people from their neighborhood. But that didn't mean that if you went into their neighborhood, you couldn't find someone who looked similar to them. It just meant that they were the prettiest in their circle of friends, in their tiny pond. They were the prettiest. And then they got a little extra help to be the epitome of beauty at that time. And that's the difference, is that last week we talked about body weight and about self-image. And that was definitely starting to come into the scene in early 2000s in a discussion on body positivity and how we can help young women to feel confident. But the thing that was also happening still at the same time is that these people looked just enough like us where the beauty and the fun of it was inspiring instead of degrading. Versus today, I feel like it is depressing when we see physically beautiful people because it feels so different from where we are. I think this also goes into relatability in that they looked like people that you could have known in real life. And so you already kind of connected with them in that sense. They remind me of this person. I can connect with that. That's a relatable everyday person who's in my life who reminds me of this actor. We still didn't know these actors. We still didn't know these models, but they looked similar enough to the people that we did know where there was a relatability aspect where influence could still be held and authority could still be held because they reminded us of somebody within our realm of understanding. So now let's talk about the come up. And what I mean by this is that this is how we got to where we are. This is the build up and how social media had a come up in the 2010s that really changed how we view beauty, how we view each other, how we view kind of women to women relationships, how we even now are viewing influence. I'm seeing online that so many people are talking about de-influencing and taking away influencer content and not doing sponsored posts. And it's really interesting because I don't think that that industry is going to die out by any means, but it is intriguing to know where we started and how within 15 years we got to where we are. So outside of movies or people that I knew in real life, the first real example of cool girls on TV that I could remember are the Kardashians. Now, The Simple Life had come out before this, and it was very popular, and Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie had gained a lot of notoriety from that. But you have to understand, I was in 6th grade when Keeping Up with the Kardashians came out, and it was just totally different. Reality TV was just taking off, and they really put it on the map in a way that can't be replicated. The storylines at that time were not as curated as they are today. In fact, I'll be honest, I don't watch the Hulu show. I was an avid watcher of the Kardashian show, and I do not like the Hulu one because I believe they're almost too self-aware of what they believe the viewers want. And so they curate different scenes to be what they think will get popular on social media. But at this time in 2007, there probably was a little bit of that, but it really was more of their day-to-day, them actually as a family. And again, not only were they wealthier than us, but they also were physically very beautiful. All of them. Like, all of them were good looking at the beginning. And then they also had a relatability because the way that they acted within a family was very similar to something I could see at my friend's house. You have a stepdad who's super wise, but he's never taken seriously. You have a mom who's running around like a chicken with its head cut off. You have sisters who are fighting. You have a brother who's kind of in the mix, who's the little brother who gets bullied. You have these little siblings who are annoying. There's this family aspect that had relatability at that time that doesn't really exist within that show now because certain certain people within their family are no longer on the show or don't present themselves on the show anymore, and they've taken a step back. And so all we really have left is now like three sisters who, work their butts off, so to say, and they have 75 businesses, and that relatability is really gone. Now, is that bad? Not necessarily. Like, good for them that they made it and that they can make all this money and that they're successful and they can still have a show and they're keeping it going. That's great. But when we're talking about a cool girl, I wouldn't even term them within the cool girl atmosphere anymore because they are so out of touch with reality and what real people are going through that it's hard to even equate them to somebody that I would know. I actually now don't know anybody who really looks like them. I don't know anybody who lives like them. I don't know anybody who has the kind of fights that they have or the problems that they have. And so that relatability is gone. Then I started thinking about Gossip Girl. And I was admittedly not a Gossip Girl fan right when it came out. I was a Gossip Girl fan a couple years into the show. I started watching it and I got really into it, especially when I was going to college for fashion. So they were Upper East Side girls and they were popular. But what's interesting about them is that they also didn't feel necessarily out of reach, even though there is such disparity between the people watching the show and who the characters were supposed to be. There would have been such financial disparity between them. But the thing that's interesting is all the people on that show were going to a private school that cost a lot of money. So just at a baseline level, yes, Dan was from Brooklyn and Serena was from the Upper East Side, but they both had an equal playing field of the school that they went to. And so it made what could have been a big gap in understanding between viewer and actor actually a lot shorter. And so again, going along with relatability, there was weird relatability to the issues that the girls were having and the fights they were having. And even though you didn't have their closet or their money or their resources or their lifestyle, you had a connection with them through more of their storylines and what they were dealing with. Now, let's talk about the history of social media. As I mentioned before, MySpace and Facebook had already come onto the scene. I believe Tumblr was already out, and there might have been Pinterest was also big at that time. But the one that really, I believe, made social media what it is today and really influenced how we view social media currently in a person-to-person perspective and a business-to-business and a marketing perspective is Instagram. So Instagram came out in 2010 and it acted a lot like Tumblr. That's what it felt like at that time, which Tumblr was something where you could scroll somebody's feed and you could follow them and you could like and you could comment on their photos. And I think that's really where Instagram got their inspiration from, was from the early Tumblr or maybe even Pinterest. I know the story behind Instagram was that it was supposed to be a travel app and it was supposed to be kind of like Foursquare where you would do a visual check-in of places that you had traveled to. But I believe that they pivoted that before they launched it officially as Instagram because they were seeing the success of social media and they wanted to pivot and make it more of a social media friendly app. They also came out with an Android version, which really elevated them above the other social media apps at that time. So in 2012, Facebook acquires Instagram. And it's the years after this where I really start to see Instagram change because I graduated high school in 2013. And so I remember this very clearly because the first year, I would say, of college, there really wasn't a lot of social media in the way that we know it today. It was still very personal, still very family to family, friend to friend, not so much business to people or marketing. That wasn't necessarily its role yet. A lot of celebrities hadn't jumped on fully, a lot of businesses hadn't jumped on fully, and so it was really in an infantile stage. Since 2014, which is when I started to do blogging, because it was starting to kind of take off, especially in the fashion realm. I would say fashion and health and beauty, and then comedy, which we'll get into that in a minute, because comedy and review videos came very quickly after these other ones. So since 2014, we have seen a lot more come out of Instagram, including carousel posts, Instagram stories, IGTV, and Reels. And we have business insights now. We start to see creator tools come out. There's been a lot of adaptation in the last 9 years of this platform. But the biggest thing that started to happen, I would say between 2014 and 2016, is that Instagram really started to drive people towards branding themselves and creating a brand for themselves and creating a name for themselves, and also pushing following who you like. Even if you don't know them personally, go follow this celebrity. That was a very big thing to do between 2014 and 2016. Obviously, it still is today, but that's really where it originated from. At the same time, YouTube is continuing to grow. So YouTube, I remember in high school, YouTube was really funny videos and maybe hair tutorials and makeup tutorials. That's what I specifically remember of YouTube in its beginning stages, was just you would share a funny video from YouTube on your Facebook page, or you would send it to your friend over a text. There really wasn't a lot going on there for a good amount of time. But I remember distinctly around the 2013-2014 timeframe, YouTube also started to shift in how the platform was being used and what was being promoted. So this is where I see the first wave of YouTubers. And I'm not going to be able to name every single person from every single wave, but I'm going to talk about the first 3 waves of YouTube that I remember. And some of these people stayed through all 3 waves. Some of them came and went. It's been really interesting to see people, like the rise and fall of people's popularity, of people's businesses, and the perception that people have of YouTubers. So let's take a little walk down memory lane. In the early years, I would say the first wave, the people that I remember just off the top of my head today when I wrote this, was Ryan Higa, Ray Williams Johnson, Jenna Marbles, Miranda Sings, and then we had some British people like Marcus Butler and Zoella. We also had Tyler Oakley, Fred, who doesn't remember Fred, Michelle Phan, and Lily Singh. And so the beginning of YouTube really was people who were in comedy, again, makeup, fashion. I would also say we're starting to see a little bit of reviews, but the review videos don't really come until the second wave of YouTube. During this time, in this first wave, most of these people were amassing a great amount of wealth, but they looked similar to when they got their popularity and when they got their following. They themselves did not change. Their content might have pivoted here and there, but their looks didn't really change in this time frame. That wasn't really what people were doing. They were just creating brands, they were making names for themselves, and they were getting money. The next generation of YouTubers that really stood out to me were James Charles, Jeffree Star, Ryan Toy's Review. I never watched him because he was too young for me, but I remember that I had little cousins and my nephew who really, really loved his page. You had people like PewDiePie, and these were people who were taking that basis of the first wave YouTubers and just bringing it up a little bit. So whatever they did, we're going to take that step and we're going to start there and we're going to create another step up. And then the third wave is really where YouTube changed. This is where I see like a 2017, 2018 era. So people like the Paul brothers, David Dobrik and the Vlog Squad, Shane Dawson, Liza Koshy, and then I call them the Saturation Girls. So this is like Ava Gutowski, Sierra Furtado, Lauren Riamaki, Lore DIY, Nikki and Gabby, Alicia Marie, Gabby Hanna, Trisha Paytas. This is where I call this like the unhinged YouTube era, because really anything could go. You could become famous for anything. There were people like Ryan Reviews Toys. He was making millions, and he was what, like 9 years old, making millions, building a business, and all he did was review toys. You had people like David Dobrik who were doing pranks. You had people like Michelle Phan. You had a lot of the Saturation girls doing morning routines and night routines. And this is what I really remember, like the end of my college years, people really getting big on YouTube. So that's what's kind of interesting, but also very scary about social media, is when you really are looking at this big boom of social influencers and social celebrities. You really only can track a 5 to 10 year history with that. And we have no clue what opportunities this type of work will bring. We have no clue what type of challenges this will bring. But it got me thinking a lot about when I was graduating high school, and I wanted to input this here. It feels a little random, but I think this is a great story. When I was graduating high school in 2013, I remember talking to my college counselor at my high school, and I was like, Mr. Sipe, I think I want to do something with fashion. And I was kind of expecting him to laugh about it or to not take it seriously, because I didn't know anyone who was doing anything with fashion. Blogging still wasn't really a thing yet. That was coming about a year later. And so I just remember him saying, Kaylee, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 5 years with the internet right now. So you go and pursue whatever job you want to do. Maybe do a very realistic minor, which I did. I did integrated marketing, communication, and design, which is traditional and social media marketing together. I just remember him saying, like, we have no clue what's going to happen. And he was totally right, because we really had no idea what would ramp up in the next 5 years between 2013 and 2018. And what did happen was internet celebrities and social media influencers and the shop apps, people making a name for themselves, people coming from nowhere and becoming celebrities, living in LA, all these people collaborating, seeing people in each other's videos and creating cross promotion. All of that stuff didn't even exist 10 years ago. Then that brings us to TikTok, because TikTok is even younger than any of these other social platforms. And the reason that I say that is because people will say, well, Musical.ly existed before. But we all know right now, if you are on TikTok today, the TikTok that we experience on a daily basis right now is incredibly different than the TikTok that even was happening 2 years ago. Things are moving so much faster. Trends are moving faster. Celebrities are coming and going faster. And it takes a lot more work to be in the public eye online currently. But I think the biggest thing that TikTok has done, and I touched on this last week in the Who's in Your Shower podcast, is I think TikTok and Instagram in the last 5 years has required us to look at our bodies in a way that are totally different. And at the same time, we have seen the popularity of plastic surgery arise. Now, am I saying, how dare you get plastic surgery? That's not really my jurisdiction to say. I don't really care. There are things that if I had the money, I probably would do it. Okay? I'm just being real. But I will say this. All of this is very young. I don't know how else to get that across on this podcast. All of this is incredibly new. All these plastic surgeries, these liposuctions, these buccal fat removals, something that's 20 years old, something that's 10 years old, that is not that old in the medical field, okay? Things like going and changing your entire face shape so that you look good on a camera is a very new way of looking at things. People coming from the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and making it online is a very new concept. And I just say that in a warning and an encouraging, because you can make it from anywhere. It does not matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you have a studio. You can sit on a stool in your very crazy closet and you can create a video. And I have no idea what this video will become. I have no idea if it'll take off. I have no idea what's going to happen, but that's the joy of it. But what's also scary about it is that it's all very new. And there's kind of a no bars idea to it. There's no boundaries. There's no one restricting you from really doing a lot of things. And so please be careful when you are posting things online, because you never have any idea who will see them or what will happen with them or how they will be used. And at the same time too, the things that we're changing about ourselves at a very young age, we have never had a generation who alters their body the way that Gen Z and millennials are, and we have no idea what any of this will look like in 50 years. When you are filling your face with filler, you have no idea what that will look like in 50 years. And when you are getting all these surgeries to look very skinny now, and you're not treating your body well, or you're starving yourself, or you're overworking yourself for your job that you think will get you somewhere, that is taking a toll on your health, and you do not know how that plays out in 50 years. So that is just my warning, and I want to be really sincere and strict on that one. Please be careful about these things. I'm not saying you can't go get plastic surgery. I'm just saying really weigh your options and think about the future, because this is very new and it's a little scary. I wanted to finish this up by giving 2 examples of women who were cool girls and how their paths have drastically changed in that time. And I want to wrap this up by talking about the present day and where we're at now and where we're going, and the struggles of the current death of the cool girl. The 2 cool girls I want to talk about and compare, not to pin women against each other, but just to discuss and to give a comparison of lifestyles and choices, are Tana Mongeau and Emma Chamberlain. Both of these women came up with Storytime YouTube, which was really popular again in that 2017-2018 era where kind of anything goes, okay? So both of these women came up at that time, and their paths were pretty similar. They both came from pretty broken homes. They both came from lower middle class, and they both blew up on TikTok for dramatic story times. And what's interesting about it is the path that they both have taken is incredibly similar and incredibly different. It's incredibly similar in that they both gain notoriety, they both gain wealth, they both bought expensive properties, they both go to expensive award shows and wear expensive dresses and have experiences that none of us can experience in the same way on a day-to-day normal person level. The difference is, I believe Emma Chamberlain hides her wealth really well, and she hides the difference between us and her very purposefully, versus Tana flaunts her wealth and flaunts her differences with people very purposefully. Because I want you to think about the fact that they both live in incredibly expensive neighborhoods in Los Angeles. They both get invited to award shows. They both have hair and makeup. They both travel a lot. They both have lived a young adult life with really no boundaries because they can do whatever they want. And they've made a life like that for themselves. And they both have similar friend groups and similar connections and similar resources. But when I think about Emma Chamberlain, I view her as a cool girl because she still feels relatable to me. The things that she enjoys, the way that she speaks, even the way that she looks, again, is like someone I could see on the street and someone who's just a little unattainable for me. Versus Tana, it creates a disconnect where that Storytime girl is not really here. And she could have simply pivoted her content differently and never changed herself and still kept those viewers. But I just think it's very interesting how they both would be considered celebrities, and they both have a lot of the same lifestyle, but one feels much more attainable than the other. So the biggest reasons that I feel like the cool girls are dying, the first one I mentioned was plastic surgery, because everybody has the ability to go out and change themselves now. And a lot of these women are doing this plastic surgery in order to look like other people that they find to be cool. But the issue is there's this joke online that all the girls look the same, and there's a little bit of truth to it. Because when everybody starts getting the same procedures from the same doctors and doing the same things to fit a beauty standard that's very current and not forever, people are starting to look very similar. And so it takes away from that rarity that came with that girl. That girl was beautiful because Kim Kardashian, for example, used to be beautiful because she looked Armenian, and that made her stand out. Now she's the blueprint for every other girl online on how they look. And to be honest, they all kind of look the same to me. I hate to say that. I don't want to be that person, but they do. They all look very similar to me. I don't feel like I look at celebrities right now and feel the same connection. Part of that is the economic difference happening today. But I think more so it's that people are blatantly out of reach and pretty blatantly out of touch. And they all kind of feel like they're bringing the same thing. Emma Chamberlain said on her podcast a couple months ago, if anyone can be famous and anything is attainable to any normal woman, then what makes someone stand out from other people? And that's not a direct quote from her. That's a summary of what she had said. But she was talking about influencers. If everybody can be an influencer, if everybody can make money, if everybody can do what Emma Chamberlain and other people on YouTube or on social media do, then what makes them rare? A lot of the joy of a cool girl is that she's a rare person that you only meet once in your life, or she's only someone that you know in one specific area of your existence. And cool girls online are all starting to look very similar. They use the same brands, they shop the same websites, they collaborate with the same people, and it's getting kind of boring, and the rarity and the distinctness is gone. Going along with all of that, we also are seeing trends move at a speed that we've never seen before. So the idea of being cool is no longer, throughout the entire decade of the 70s, they wore these three things. And if you had those three things, you were cool, right? Style is moving and changing, and how you look at the architecture of your home and the way that you put on your clothes and style them and the way that you dye your hair and the way you do your makeup. It used to be decade-long styles and trends, and now it's every single week of every single month of every single year, we have a new trend and a new style. And this song is trending, and this look is trending, and this week this hair color is trending, and this week we're going to do this, and that's how we're going to act, and we're going to get these surgeries so that we can look like this person because this is the epitome of beauty right now. And trends are moving so quickly where people can't keep up. And so this is why I'm really trying to get across with what I just said about Emma Chamberlain and about plastic surgery. If everybody looks the same, and everybody has the same opportunities, and if everybody can be trendy, then what makes you cool? And what makes you stand out? When we're viewing ourselves, I think what we need to look at is not so much how can I fit in, but how can I stand out? And I don't mean that in the same way that we did in the 90s. I feel like in the 90s, it was like, well, we're goth and we're emo and we're punk and we stand out and we're just losers and we're misunderstood and like we're socially awkward. And I feel like what I'm actually going for in this is just the idea that if you as an individual are not influenced by outside sources, you can have your own opinions and you can have your own things that you like to do. And you can style yourself however you want. And at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. And you will be a cool girl and you will stand out because you have originality and you're distinct and you're rare. Versus if we keep going down this path of the culture dictates what's cool or not, there's no end line to that. We just keep making new ideas for what's cool and we keep doing them. And I think there's something really important about being original in how you're creating things, being original in how you present yourself, being original in the things that you like, and then educating others because that's what makes you fun. And so my advice for all the ladies and the men too, if you're listening, is reflect on yourself and what do you do differently from the people around you? And what helps you stand out? I remember when I was younger, I felt like the black sheep in a lot of situations. I felt like the black sheep in a lot of ways in my family, in my friend groups. The things that I enjoyed, other people didn't really gravitate towards. The things I was inspired by, other people didn't necessarily think were interesting. And so find those things. Find those things within you. And instead of viewing yourself as a black sheep, view yourself as being called out to be different. And view yourself as being someone who can bring something different to the table. Because if everybody else is watching the same movies, listening to the same music, and wearing the same clothes, the person who actively doesn't do that will be cool. And especially 10 out of 10, if you do it with confidence, you will become a cool person that people want to be around. I think the cool girl is dying so that the new version of her can come out. I think that the old cool girl and what made someone popular and fun and flirty is rebranding herself. And I think what's really actually cool is people who are passionate about things, who can educate you on things, who enjoy different hobbies, who have different interests. That's what makes someone exciting to be around. Not that they have the coolest cell phone or the coolest clothing or the coolest car. It's that they stand out and they're memorable in your mind. And so this isn't like a buck the system type of podcast. What this really is just an encouragement that what you bring to the table is what's actually going to help you stand out in the long run. And that the death of the cool girl is not necessarily a bad thing, because the people who choose to do their own thing end up actually being notable. And when you figure out what those things are that you really enjoy, you can bring that to the table and you can create content around that. And I guarantee you that you will find a community online who vibes with that. And you will find a group of people online who really resonate with your experiences. People resonated with Tana Mojo because they also fought with their parents, or they also wanted to fight people at school. And she was doing stuff. Now, was it always legal? I don't know. But she was doing things that other people wished that they could do, but they didn't feel bold enough to do it. And that's what gave her notoriety. And so I'm just going to finish with this. I met with a social media strategist a few months ago. Her name is Amber. She runs Salt Light Social if you are on Instagram, and she's amazing. I go and meet with her. She's absolutely worth the money when I have those meetings because she brings up nuggets of truth like this. When people talk about niching down, they think that what they're supposed to do is find an interest. Oh, I do music and fashion and relationships. That's what I talk about. But what really you need to niche down to, and what really will help you stand out and be the best version of yourself, to be the new age cool girl, is not necessarily that you have to do a morning routine and you have to eat the healthiest and you have to do the hardest workout. It is that you have morals and values and interests and hobbies and conversation topics that make you different from everybody else and that make you stand out. That's what people connect to. We aren't in a place in life right now where we are connecting to wealth. We're actually avoiding wealth. And I don't mean that as in like, if somebody came and gave me money, I wouldn't take it. I mean like, people who are rich and famous right now in this moment, this is such a distinct moment, I think, in American history for sure. We are not levitating towards people who have notoriety and wealth and money. We're actually starting to see people levitate towards micro influencers and towards people who have very distinct moral beliefs and visions for the future and ideas and interests that make them exciting to be around and make them different. And so whether you are an influencer, you're not an influencer, you're a marketer, or you're just a regular person, that is something that's going to help you stand out and really become notable among your peers and among your family. And when people meet you, that's what's going to stick with them. And that's actually a networking tactic. because they're going to go to this other person, they're going to have a conversation, and they're going to say, oh, I really wish I knew someone who knew something about this. And you're the first person who's going to come to mind because you stand out in somebody's memory. So I guess what I'm trying to say with this is going a different route than I intended this podcast to go. I thought it was just going to be about the death of the cool girl and like where the cool girls are going now. But I think what it really is that it's beneficial to stand out on your own and to do your own thing and to have your own interests. And it makes you interesting. It makes you lively and exciting. And people gravitate towards people who have something different. And so I just want to end with that. Like, you have the ability to change your life. We have social media right now that is running the world, and you can do anything with it. And there's really no rules other than like if you're an awful, horrible person. But there's really no rules to what you can do with social media. And if you can help yourself stand out with your niches of morality and beliefs and lifestyle, and not just your niches of interests, you can really make a name for yourself, and you can really dictate the next generation of what's cool and what's fun and what's exciting. So thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope that this podcast helped you reflect on what you bring to the table and what makes you nuanced. I'd love to hear some of the things that you guys are interested in. What are things that make you guys stand out as you've reflected on this? What are things that make you feel excited or inspired? Like, put those in the comments and let's see if we can start having like a little community here on YouTube and having discussions in the comments. What are the types of things that you like to do? What are the things that you believe in and you really stand for? What are things that you are interested in doing in the future? You never know, guys. Like, in the comments of this YouTube video, you could be connecting with your future best friend or your business partner. You have no idea. That's the joy of social media.